Programmers and developers, do you vibe code? If you do you feel guilty? Be honest. Well, if you feel guilty, then maybe what we need is an approval from one of the greats in our field. That is Linus, the developer of Linux and Git. Well, the title is Linus Torvalds is okay with vibe coding as long as it's not used for anything that matters. Linux inventor also discusses Rust in the kernel, Nvidia's proprietary code, and the problem of AI crawlers. It's an article written by Tim Anderson on theregister.com. I always feel guilty vibe coding. I feel guilty when I copy and paste codes from LLMs. And I think there's a certain way of using it, and not using it is not the answer, I don't think, because we can be more productive with it using LLM. But just vibe coding, I don't think that's the answer either. So I'm wondering, let's learn from the greats what Linus has to say about this. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Pascal, and on this channel we share all that is to do with programming and development every day, an article a day. And so if that interests you, like and subscribe and comment, share. Let's get into the article. Linux and Git inventor Linus Torvalds discussed AI in software development in an interview earlier this month, describing himself as fairly positive about vibe coding, but as a way into computing, not for production coding, where it would likely be horrible to maintain. This is something that I knew before, that Linus wasn't against LLM, because I remember someone asking about 3 months ago, and Linus was surprisingly positive about it, surprisingly optimistic about it. And I think it's good to know, because himself, he has done many great things without LLM, before the time of LLM. And so I feel like it's easy for people like him to say, this is like new generation stuff, they're lazy, blah 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 blah. But he's open about it, he acknowledges that it can be effective and so on. So I feel like I trust his view on it, because I feel like there's no judgment from him. Torvald, I don't know if I pronounce his last name right. Torvalds was interviewed by Dirk Hondo, head of open source at Verizon, at the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit in Seoul, South Korea earlier this month. Torvalds is technical lead and maintainer of the Linux kernel, but said that for the last almost 20 years, I've not been a programmer. As for Git, which he invented, I really just look at it from the side. Asked about the process of Linux kernel development, Torvalds said his role has changed. I used to say that my job is often saying no, he said, turning down new ideas that would be hard to maintain, but now he sometimes has to say yes to new things against opposition from long-standing maintainers who kind of get stuck in a rut. He had in mind the contentious matter of Rust in the kernel, though he said that there are disagreements in other areas too. Rust is actually becoming a real part of the kernel instead of being this experimental thing, he said, adding that it has taken longer than expected. Damn, so Rust is actually becoming a real part of the kernel. That's really interesting to know. And Rust is becoming more and more popular from the job market that I've seen and from the people I've talked to. And again, I think this shows that while Linus is like one of the greats, that I feel like he says yes to changes. Linux has been working well for years and years, but he's open to changes. He likes innovation, and it shows that he's a technologist. Despite the adventure of Rust, Torvalds said, I like boring. Boring to me is no super exciting new features that will break machines for millions of people around the world. One of the common things that I find with the greats, whether it be sports or academia or any kinds of fields, like any kind of field, that they keep it simple. They like to keep it simple, and I think this is what This is what I read when I read this sentence. Is he troubled that with the AI boom, Nvidia's proprietary GPU, microkernel, and CUDA language is driving the hardware rather than open source Linux? That's really no different from user space, said Torvalds, adding that one of the nice parts of AI is it made Nvidia be a good player in the Linux kernel space, famously not true 20 years ago. Torvalds said that the big issue with AI was the crawlers have been very disruptive to a lot of our infrastructure because they gather data from kernel.org source code. He said that the kernel maintainers do suffer bugs and security notices that are made up by people who misuse AI, but that it is not as big a problem as is for other projects such as curl. Torvalds is not using or even playing with AI-assisted coding, though he said, I'm sure people are looking at it even for the kernel code base. I think that's being on open source and a lot of people contributing, and it would be so hard to differentiate from who are using just AI coded, who's just submitting AI coded pull request, which looks correct, but you just have to deep dive in to see that it's wrong. That it would be difficult. And that's not necessarily the person who submitted, it's their fault. They could have used AI, of course, for assistance, and they might have just missed it. And that's a difficult problem. And it's difficult because with the AI, naturally, there will be more pull requests, more commitments, more contributions. Torvalds is not, but yeah, I think it's important to say that it's not that didn't exist before the LLM. It existed before, it still exists now, but right now it will be the sheer volume of it is much greater and it's harder to spot, I find. Torvalds is not using or even, so we've read that. Regarding vibe coding, Torvalds described himself as fairly positive, but not for kernel development. Computers have become more complicated than when he learned to code and was typing in programs from computer magazines. Vibe coding, he said, is a great way for people to get computers to do something that maybe they couldn't do otherwise. This is despite the fact that vibe coding may be a horrible idea from a maintenance standpoint, with developers getting laid off because of AI. Hondo asked what the impact will be on software development as a career. It's a complicated question, said Torvalds, and one that can only be answered in a few years' time. His opinion is that AI is just another tool. The same way compilers free people from writing assembly code by hand and increase productivity enormously, but didn't make programmers go away. Torvalds is looking forward to a time when AI is less hyped and more like the everyday reality that nobody talks constantly about. I have to say I'm on the same page as Linus. For me, AI is just another tool. It's a very useful tool. It's a different type of tool than we have seen before, but at the end of the day, to me, it's just another tool. And just like a tool, like a hammer, it's very good in some things that it's made for, and it's very poor in some things that it's not made for. And right now I feel like we're using the hammer everywhere we can. Disagree? One can always send Torvalds an email. I can almost guarantee you that I'll read it, but I can almost guarantee you that I will not answer it, he said. It's very rare that I answer email. I like his honesty. But it's always really insightful and interesting to hear from someone who's as experienced as Linus and someone who's as accomplished as Linus and see what he thinks of it. And to me, I think he's got a very realistic point of view. He's got a very unclouded point of view, which is very cool to me, and I respect that a lot. And yeah, that's all for today. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe.